right, everyone, we're going to get started. Welcome to the Master Series, your guide to intelligent production, brought to you by Entertainment Partners. I'm your host, Natalie Nelson. In the Master Series, we focus on important issues impacting the entertainment industry and its workers through in-depth discussions with legal, tax, payroll, technology, and production experts. And today's topic is crowdfunding, and our expert panel will be discussing how this grassroots avenue of funding can help you to launch your next project. A few quick housekeeping items as we get started today. First is that we encourage you to post questions for our panel using the Q&A section of the Zoom call. You may do so by clicking the Q&A icon in the navigation menu, and we'll do our best to save time after our discussion to answer questions. Also, please take 30 seconds to answer a short feedback survey after today's webinar. This gives you an opportunity for us to get feedback on today's topic, as well as to suggest topics for future webinars. And your feedback is very important to us, so 30 seconds is all that we ask. Now let's meet today's panel. Today we are joined by Emily Best, founder and CEO of Seed&Spark, a unique organization that accelerates the cultural impact of storytelling. The Seed&Spark crowdfunding platform and national education program have helped thousands of bold storytellers to raise tens of millions of dollars, bringing to life entirely new stories, and they have built an engaged community of over 500,000 creators around the world. Seed&Spark crowdfunders have an 88% success rate, 0 platform fees, and a new patron circle where industry leaders can contribute up to $5,000 to a crowdfunding campaign. Seed&Spark also builds curriculum around these curated selections of stories and delivers them for maximum impact through Film Forward, an enterprise training platform that helps some of the world's largest brands to build an innovative and accountable culture. Also with us is Stacy Bradford, senior hardware engineer at IndieGoGo. Stacy's passion is bringing products to market, be it retail or direct to consumer, and he has consulted countless entrepreneurs in bringing their ideas to life. As senior hardware manager at IndieGoGo, his primary role centers around finding the next new thing with a high impact potential and providing its entrepreneurs with strategy, counsel, and direction to position their projects for success on the platform. In his role, he has assisted bootstrapped entrepreneurs and Fortune 500 companies alike in raising scores of millions of dollars on IndieGoGo's platform. And rounding out today's panel is producer and actor Zachary Fineblum, a graduate of the prestigious University of Minnesota Guthrie Theater Acting Training Program. He has performed at the La Jolla Playhouse, Guthrie Theater, Hudson Valley Shakespeare Festival, and Shakespeare Theater of New Jersey, among others. He has appeared in a recurring role in the period drama Granite Flats, starring Parker Posey and Christopher Lloyd, and he is currently pursuing an MFA in producing at the Firestein Graduate School of Cinema, where he has recently completed principal photography on 2 short films helmed by international directors from Brazil and Peru. He is a member of the Brooklyn Film Festival Screening Committee, the Actors Equity Association, and Broadcast Music, Inc. And finally, today's guest moderator is our resident production financing expert, John Hadity, Executive Vice President of the Incentives Group here at Entertainment Partners, where John specializes in the monetization of tax credits and minimum guarantees. John began his career at Orion Classics, a division of Orion Pictures, where he served as technical and administrative director. He is former president and CEO of Hadity and Associates, a consultancy firm that specializes in risk management and production finance. He is former executive vice president of motion picture and television production for Miramax Films, and projects recently financed include Snowden, American Made, and The Assistant. Good morning and good afternoon to you, John, and panelists. It is lovely to see all of you today. Hello, hello.
Thank you for having us.
Greetings. Hi, thanks, Natalie, and thank you, Natalie and Stacy and Emily and Zach for joining me here today. Zach, you can turn your camera on. There you go. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. So today we're talking about crowdfunding, and I want to kind of break this up into 3 parts. I thought we talk about the concept in general, preparation, what folks need to do in order to access this platform and this money, and then what the process is like and some of the things that we need to be aware of. I want to be clear that we're talking about crowdfunding. We're talking about the raising of dollars that is not equity. So you're not selling a piece of your property. I will later on in the conversation, I'll touch a little bit on crowdfunding platforms that do exist where you can raise equity, but that's not going to be the majority of this discussion. So conceptually, you guys tell me if you think it's fair. When I think of crowdfunding, I think, okay, I've got a project that I'm really excited about. I've got friends, I've got family. Hopefully they share my excitement in my project, and they might want to give me some money so that I can move this project forward. Does that sound fair?
No, if you rely on your friends and family, you will not be successful.
Yeah.
That is a great place to start. And certainly you hope that your friends and family are your social proof. So if your friends and family are not excited, it's going to be really hard for you to succeed. But crowdfunding should absolutely not be engaged in if all you're trying to do is resource from your direct community. And there are two reasons. One is crowdfunding can be a renewable resource if you think about it from an audience engagement perspective and an audience participation perspective, and not from a family money gathering perspective. And two, there are a lot of people who come from communities that don't have resources, where their friends and family don't have money to contribute, and that would leave them out. And that is not what we want. So we want to make sure that people who look around at their friends and family and say, hey, they're really struggling, there's no way I can crowdfund, that can't be our answer. So I think it's very important to level set and say, yes, it can be very helpful, but your friends and family don't have to contribute money as social proof. They can contribute follows, they can contribute shares, they can contribute connections, they can contribute promotion, they can contribute things that are free to them also that can help make your crowdfunding campaign successful. I think the very common thing that we imagine is that we're just raising from our friends and family, and that assumes that our friends and family have money we can raise from. Yeah. So for me, if you're thinking about it as anything other than a deep audience engagement strategy, it's going to be really painful to do.
Yeah. And if I may jump in here and build on what Emily just laid down. So, I'm predominant, well, any entrepreneur, any creator, well, anyone out there, your friends and family, are going to be your base. But within that base is an inherent and innate bias that needs to be addressed as well, because your friends and family do not want to tell you sometimes that anything else. They're like, hey man, it's pretty terrible. You got a stinker, a real stinker. They're not going to tell you that. So how do you be cognizant of your own biases right there? And their support comes in many different ways. Make for sure you put yourself in a position to have open and honest feedback, and not, because I've seen entrepreneurs, I've seen creators, I've seen them go out there and they will pursue and pursue and pursue. I know this
because my mom thinks it's good.
Yes. Oh man. Well, my mom told me I'm a unique star and an unusual treasure, but yet here I am, son. I'm not the president of the United States. I don't know if you guys know that about me, but yeah, in other ways that they contribute, in what you had mentioned, they can also, that are free to them. The best way would be like a referral, and then tapping into their larger, and this would be how I would do it, tapping into their larger social network, so that you would be 1 degree removed of the innate bias and perhaps get some authentic and honest feedback on your project.
So we're really talking about something that's completely dependent on capturing market attention, right? So how do you do that? How do the platforms help you do that? Do you have to come to the table with a large social media community, and as you said, Emily, I mean, we're talking about referrals too, right? So when you get involved with something on a social media platform, the best way to increase the size of your community is ask them to share what they just did among their own community, right?
Yeah, I mean, just like, since this is a film organization, and we have Zach, who's a great filmmaker here, and certainly Seed&Spark is focused on filmmakers as well. I will say, like, you know, film specifically, and really all entrepreneurial endeavors are eventually about the customer and the audience. And so efforts are really about building and growing that audience. And just like in filmmaking, the project kind of lives and dies in the prep. And so where we spend a lot of our time at Seed&Spark is in the prep, and Zach can talk about the like slings and arrows of that. It's not like always the funnest part of our process, but we spend a lot of time with filmmakers making sure that their audience engagement strategies are planned and thought out, and that they have the materials ready to communicate them, and that they've set a goal that aligns with their needs as a project. And so it's not just social media is like, obviously it's a great accelerant, but it's not the only outreach strategy that works. There are lots of mailing lists and partners and brands, and there are lots of different ways to reach people. I think a good old fashioned like showing up at community events and partnering with local organizations and actually getting out in your local community. Like, social media is one in a range of outreach strategies that you should be engaging in long before you're getting ready to crowdfund, because a crowdfunding campaign is an audience engagement strategy. I think the thing that most people do is they assume that crowdfunding is mostly about the money. It's not. A really successful crowdfunding campaign, money is a powerful and helpful byproduct of a great audience engagement strategy that should be an accelerant for your project and for your career. And if you're only thinking about it as getting money, you're going to be like, God, this is a lot of work just to get some money. Like, you have to be thinking about it as like a global career trajectory strategy. And then it becomes really exciting because all of the different ways you can build relationships that can support and sustain you, not just for this project, but for throughout your career, then you understand why that engagement needs to happen before you start asking people for money. It's sort of like, Stacy, like Zach, you and I have had a tangential professional relationship. John, I've known you a long time. I probably would ask you for $20 if I really needed it. But like, Stacy, I barely know you. It's not an appropriate time in our relationship for me to be like, can I have some money?
Emily, let me tell you, I feel 100% comfortable. If you want to go ahead and ask, I got a 20 spot over here for you. 100%.
Well, you know, absolutely, Emily. I think what you're saying is right on. And I think that was one of the main pieces of feedback that we got once we submitted our initial campaign, was to think of it less about crowdfunding and more about audience building. And so, you know, turning the whole process of this campaign into telling its own story, really. So you're telling a story with the film, but you're also telling a separate story with the crowdfunding campaign in itself, especially with the incentives. I think in a lot of the feedback we got, I can't remember our person's name, but they were stressing that building interesting incentives to kind of tell a story with the incentives, which kind of helped us expand our thinking about how to craft those from really kind of simple, kind of everyday ideas into kind of more interesting ideas that really attracted pledges and built an audience that felt invested in the film. I guess they felt like they might have some ownership in the product as well, which I think is important.
Give me some ideas of examples of incentives that you're talking about, because we're not talking about tax incentives, right? We're talking about
not in tax incentives. Yeah, incentives to pledge, and they were very specific to not use the word donate, but to say pledge or contributes. That the audience again felt like they had that they were playing a part, you know, in the film. In our case, we were making a short horror film that was kind of like a a tribute to like early slasher 70s giallo films. It's called Red Gloves. It's currently in post-production. We're hoping that we can release it in the spring, so look out for that. But like, you know, for example, so I'm gonna bring it up. Interesting titles, I think, is important. That's really a big part of it. So like our $10 pledge, we called it the Scream Queen. And it was basically just getting a shout out on socials. Our $25 pledge, which was interesting because we didn't have a $25 pledge at first. I think we went straight from like 10 to 50. And we were told that the $25 is a really, really important pledge level. So we created one for that called Final Girl, which was getting a personalized thank you card from the creators.
I want to mention why really quickly. Just that leap from 10 to 50 is because if you don't have that much cash, $50 sounds like a lot, but $10 might like sound like a little, and 25 might feel meaningful. So, you know, the biggest sales strategy typically is like you have 3 options and people pick the middle option. In that under $100 tier, 25 is really common for folks who are like, you know, I don't have a ton of expendable income, but I want to make a meaningful contribution, and it makes them feel good and like they've done something and it's a meaningful contribution to the campaign. And so we just find that there's like a huge, in the distribution, in the bell curve, like there's just a huge swell at $25. And I think it's like, that's kind of like the person just starting out, like somebody who doesn't make a ton of money, but really cares about supporting art, supporting projects, like supporting their fellow creators. I think honestly, it's like the same $25 that we're all passing around to each other kind of over the years, but it is a really meaningful amount that allows people to step forward that isn't art. Like $50, like that's like a dinner out. Do you know what I mean? Like you have to think about like, what are you asking people to sacrifice also in the campaign, and how meaningful can you make it to them? So I just wanted to say that as context for like kind of why these numbers matter.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, I mean, you guys know what you're doing, because that's where we got the majority of our pledges was in the $25 range. But anyway, yeah, so we just had kind of like horror term references as we went forward, you know, Scared Stiff, The Crypt Keeper. And as we moved up, we offered kind of actual ownership titles in the film, like the $500 range was like associate producer. And then we had a range, you get an associate producer credit. And then our final award level was getting an executive producer credit. And then at different levels, we also offered getting like behind the scenes footage, which is really cool. And also getting earlier cuts of the film, which I think is an amazing thing to see, again, like involving the people pledging to the project, involving them, letting them see, having an inside look into the actual process. Because currently we have a rough cut, and that's going to drastically change from our final cut. So enabling, you know, the people that are pledging to see that journey, I think is really, really interesting and exciting for them. So I think that's a great incentive to incorporate that somehow.
I like that strategy of being able to see the early cuts as well. But there's one thing that I want to touch on, just because that was a lot of different methods and different ideas, you know, for dear viewer out there to potentially raise funds through a crowdfunding campaign for their next, you know, creative project for their next film. But I want to make for sure that I that I cite rather, that, and it's one thing, it's choice paralysis. You want to make for sure that you do not have too many rewards on your page, because what can potentially happen here is that, you know, they see so many. It's like, you know, you get on these food apps, I got all these different choices. I just wanted bone broth, and now I'm looking for all this different stuff. And, but like, it's too many choices, and then they might not back. And that's something that I really want to caution dear viewer on. That's
a great point. That's a terrific point.
Zach, did you raise all of your budget on the crowdfunding platform?
We did. Yeah. We actually raised a surplus as well. which was really exciting. And, you know, Emily, you were talking earlier about how, you know, it's important to not just depend on family and friends, and to expand the scope of who you're trying to reach, which is totally true. And I think we were somewhat successful in doing that. But our budget, what we were trying to hit was 10,000, which is a pretty modest number. So I'm going to say that the majority of the pledges did come from people we knew, maybe not necessarily like directly family and friends, but in some way tangentially kind of knew these people. But the big thing for us was, I think what created that surplus was we actually started the campaign about 2 weeks prior to shooting, and then it lasted a month. So we actually had footage by the time we reached kind of the final stretch of the campaign. And we were about, I don't know, maybe like $2,000, $1,500 short towards the end. And what really put us over the end was we created a little teaser, and we put that on Instagram mainly. I think some other social websites, but it was mainly Instagram. And that little teaser, that's what really launched us over the end. So I don't know, maybe if you're able to, because I think one of the things that was one of the areas that we were going to touch on was like, when do you create the campaign? And I think us being able to have actual footage from the shoot that we were able to put into the campaign was huge for us meeting our goal and ultimately surpassing it.
Yeah. One thing, I got a question for you. How long was your teaser? Because, you know, I want to make for sure that people out there have like quantitative points of reference, benchmarks, KPIs, et cetera, to like really hang their hat on. How long was your teaser?
It was short.
Okay.
It was very short. I think it was maybe like 20 seconds, but it was good. It was a good, so as I said, the film's called Red Gloves, and it's about, again, it's this kind of 70s Italian horror, like Dario Argento. It was Suspiria. I don't know if you guys seen Suspiria. Not the newer one, the older one, the 70s one. But that's kind of what we were paying tribute to. And so the director, Santiago Sabasalem, he used a lot of those zoom shots, you know, that happen in those kind of films where there's a knife and then it zooms right in on the knife. So we had this dance that we choreographed for the film, because it's about this group of dancers in like 1980s NYC, and one of the dancers stays late after rehearsal, and this figure in red gloves is stalking her. So the opening scene is this great dance that we had choreographed by this brilliant choreographer, and there's this beautiful moment where the dancers open up, and the camera just zooms right in on our main star. And so we just use that as the teaser, basically. Also, a friend of mine composed music for the dance sequence, and it was just really, really beautiful. So we just used that shot, and then we cut to black, red screen, red gloves coming soon. And it just worked really, really well. But yeah, it was only like 20 seconds long.
Well, you sold me on it already.
Yeah, I think what you're describing is also a really common phenomenon, right? Which is like most people, especially if they don't know you, they want to know they're picking a winner. And where we start to see that tipping point is usually after a campaign has hit about 30%, which is why we really hammer this home with our creators. Like, you kind of need to know where that first 30% is coming from. If you have friends and family who can support you, you have to like go out and talk to them about like, hey, like I'm counting on you in that first week. If you don't necessarily, then it's a process of audience building and getting organizations who are going to help you do that outreach to make sure that you can hit that first peak. And then the more proof points you can show that not only is this going to happen, but it's going to be good, that will really send people over the edge. So we see very commonly that campaigns for post-production that already have footage and can demonstrate like, oh, what we caught in the can is really good. Those have an easier time, right, than campaigns in development. And that really relies on your ability to shoot a really great short pitch video that demonstrates that you can do a lot with a little. so that if we do pour fuel on your fire in the form of capital, you can really make something amazing.
So, John, I think you'll appreciate this. As you know, you need to see, I'm sure you want to see the numbers of a film around a film. So, you know, in terms of when you're thinking about it in terms of a crowdfunding campaign, that 30% number that Emily just cited, hyper important. So you really need to understand and have a really good anticipation, at least of an approximation of what your average conversion price is going to be, the average transaction, average backing, average pledge rather, on your campaign page, so that you can get to that number and then deconstruct, well, how big does my audience need to be to get to that 30% number in the first 24 hours or 48, whatever it may be. So then you have a good understanding of, well, and is this the right time to press launch and publish this campaign?
So let's talk a little bit about about the process of the preparation, right? Because you're gonna, so you've got to have a fundraising goal, I suspect, right? Is that a requirement for? Yes. It is.
Yeah. So all platforms require you to set a goal. In the case of Seed&Spark, we are all or nothing, sort of, we like to say, which is to say, once you hit 80% of your fundraising goal, we release the funds. So the setting of the goal is really important. And what our advice to filmmakers is raise money for exactly what you are promising in your pitch.
Yes.
So if your pitch is, we are going to make this movie, go to festivals and get it to audiences, then you would want to make sure that the money you are raising is for all of that work. Absolutely. Otherwise, be specific about what you're raising for. And we have seen many films raise in multiple stages. So they'll do a crowdfunding campaign for development. They might do a crowdfunding campaign for post-production and another one for festivals. Like we've seen some projects come back 3 or 4 times at different stages. Because to Zach's point, he saw in real time, and I will say we don't actually typically advise you raise money while you're shooting unless you are ready to do that work. And kudos, my friend. But he also got to see in real time the difference of fundraising before you have it in the can and fundraising after it's in the can. And some filmmakers are really conscious of that. And so they'll devise a strategy where they do a portion of the fundraising prior to the shoot. And then once they have it in the can and they know they've got stuff to show and they've built a little bit of a saucy audience who's really excited about them in the first campaign, they'll come back with that sexy teaser, with something to show for it and say, now our strategy is to get this out to audiences and this is how you can help us do that. So Stacy, I'm super glad you brought that up because I think the waypoints are really important as well. Absolutely.
Absolutely. And just one more thing about the, I guess, the strategy around your funding. You know, tech and innovation, the funding goal is more or less a marketing strategy, but doesn't mean anything. So be for sure not to follow that route. It's the authenticity in the creative campaigns that's going to be super important. Your storytelling. So set your goal and think of it as a minimum viable product to get your product produced. That's your goal and build stretch goals out from there so that you can start living a little bit more lavishly on set.
So let me just go back because you had said that with Seed&Spark it was a 80%, right? So what happens if you only raise 70%?
You don't get your money. But I will tell you, the people who raise 70% and don't get to 80, that's probably under 0.25% of campaigns, and that's usually campaign abandonment. Something happened. Right. Typically speaking, so we have an 88% campaign success rate. 88% of campaigns that launch hit 80% or better. But the average, if you average it all out, the funding rate is close to 94%. Like that's the average amount of the goal that they raise. And so of the 12% who don't hit their goal, they typically don't even raise the first $1,000. And there's just a real miss on expectation versus reality. So we almost never see a campaign get to 70% and not get to 80. It's usually like just a total mismatch. Sometimes it falls apart. The team they thought was going to help them isn't going to help them. Like that 12% is typically like the project may have fractured or the timing wasn't right. It's very rarely like you get halfway to your goal and can't get across the finish line.
And then do you if you don't meet your goal, or at least 80%, or let's say even 30%, does Seed&Spark send the money back to the person who pledged it, or the people?
We don't even take the money. We don't take the money until the campaign has reached its goal and is closed. So if a campaign is 30 days and they hit 80% or 90% or 100%, it's only on the campaign close date that we charge those cards and send the money around.
Wow,
So
okay.
there's no like I'm taking your money and I'm sending it back to you. And like most crowdfunding platforms, at that point, the relationship is between the filmmaker and the funder, and the platform is simply a facilitator, right? So the legal agreement at that point, the legal agreement is that the crowdfunder, the person raising money for the project is supposed to do with that money what they said they would. And if a pledger doesn't feel like they're doing it, that relationship is between them. Like at that point, the platforms are just here to facilitate the relationships. We're not intermediating them once they are established.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you this. I know that, for instance, Kickstarter has a time, there's a certain amount of time that you have to reach your fundraising goal.
Yeah.
Do either of your companies have a time allotment, or is it kind of unlimited?
Oh, yes. Oh, no. I have strong feelings about this, but Stacy, I'd be curious. Like, yes, you can set your campaign for 30, 45, or 60 days. And on occasion, creators have had these like really specific ideas, and they might work with our team to set these like really specific campaigns because they're like, we want to launch on this event and then we need to close at this closing event. So occasionally we've worked with creators to like set very specific parameters, but 30, 45, or 60, the longer the campaign, the longer the marathon.
Yeah.
And so like 30 for a film campaign, 30 days can be really optimal. I think if you know you're crowdfunding around a certain holiday, like you would think holidays make people generous, they don't. People are not online funding campaigns, they just go away. So like if you're funding over a holiday, sometimes people pick 45-day campaigns so that they can anticipate certain lulls that happen because of holidays or things that they're working on, or maybe they need to shoot something in a week. But yeah, I personally, I've crowdfunded a bunch of times for my own projects. Like I don't want to do it for longer than 30 days. I'm like, it's a blitz and then it's over.
Yeah, you definitely shouldn't. Creative should most certainly be treated like a sprint, blitz, whatever semantical choice one chooses. But yeah, because the longer you stretch it out, the more content you're going to have. There's a longer strategy to it. How do you keep your audience engaged for that amount of time, etc. So yeah, our IndieGoGo in our field guide references 45 in such typical fashion. To myself, I personally agree that is too long. So again, Emily, I think 30 days is really the way to do it.
Cool. And you had said, Emily, that when you reach your fundraising goal and it's within the time period, that's when the credit cards are charged. I remember when Natalie was introducing you that one of the things that she mentioned was that Seed&Spark does not charge a platform fee. Do they charge a credit card processing fee?
Well, we don't charge a processing fee. Stripe charges a processing fee. So we're not a credit card processor. Seed&Spark is not a credit card processor. We work with Stripe and then also Apple Pay and Google Pay, depending on like what platform you're on. And so they charge payment fees. Those are, as far as I know, unavoidable on the internet. I don't think anybody gets out of those if you're because effectively, like as a filmmaker raising money, you sort of become a merchant, right? And so the payment processor is going to charge their fees, but we no longer charge a platform fee as of January this year.
Stacy, how about IndieGoGo?
Well, IndieGoGo, yes, we do have a fee. There's a 5% fee, platform fee, with a 3% transaction fee that again goes to Stripe. the through line of transaction one supposes, but what do you get in exchange for that 5%? And that's going to be something that is super important, is you get access to myself. You're going to get access to an audience that's 22 million monthly active users. You're going to get you get something in return. And actually, Emily, I want to make for sure that I'm saying this, and I'm realizing I'm not trying to. That is not me. I did not mean to say you're going to get something in return. I would never mean to put down. I love your platform, so that is not. I want to be 100% awkward, Stacy. I am. So don't worry about it.
Just so people understand, like the economics of Seed&Spark, we allow backers to tip.
Yeah.
So we look, the customer ultimately is the backer, and we want to make sure for our filmmakers. So we want to make sure that as a platform, we're also clearly articulating our value to the backers, and they can choose to support all the other things we do. So we offer free education year-round that helps support filmmakers in the life cycle of their creative journey. We have a personal campaign specialist that reviews every single project, and I do think Zach should talk about that process, because like it's not the funnest thing in the world, but it is really helpful. And then we support with cross promotions, and then we often work with filmmakers when they're on their festival circuit to do cross promotions and co-promotions. If you go to our socials, you'll see Instagram takeovers with our filmmakers and things like that. We just, we have the benefit, I think, as a platform of being solely focused on storytellers to kind of carve out a very special space in the crowdfunding world. And what our creators said after the last 2 years of the pandemic was like, man, we don't need any more inspiration. We don't need more time to write. We just need money to make our shit. Sorry.
That's the level of authenticity that will get you fully funded on Seed&Spark right there.
And we were like, cool, how can we take on some of that responsibility? And so that's when we started looking at a business model for us that didn't involve taking a cut out of what filmmakers raise, and the patrons program. So bringing in high profile creators who would just contribute money to projects because they feel like giving back is a really important part of their next steps. And so folks like Mark Duplass and Jason Reitman and Alex Kurtzman, like they come and contribute money to campaigns as matching funds along the way. Like we're just able to be laser focused on like, what do these storytellers need right now? And we're constantly surveying them to understand like, what is that? And then how can we as a company modify our models to support that? It's scary, right? Because like, we don't know we're going to make like what kind of money we're going to make month to month. But we are taking the responsibility to articulate the value to the backers. And so far, so good, right? I think what we really want for folks to, we want to build a muscle that the backers are like here, not just to support this creative project, but like all the things that support a life cycle of these creators. And then the people who are like, nah, I'm just supporting my friend, like they can totally choose to do that.
Zach, why don't you talk just for a few minutes about the process and what, how you felt about the process as a filmmaker?
Yeah, I mean, as Emily said, I mean, this was a difficult film for us to make, just because there were a lot of elements. We had a pretty big cast. We had extensive costume design. The location was, there were a lot of complexities there. So when we were preparing this campaign, we were totally consumed by all of that, right? And so, when we were building the campaign, I think there was an element of like, all right, let's just get it up there, like let's just get it up there, because we had so many other things that we were thinking about just with the producing of this film. And so, Santiago and I, the director, we built the campaign. We thought it was pretty good. We made our video. which we liked, and we put it up there. And I think we were expecting like Seed&Spark to be like, all right, you're off. You know what I mean? And we're like, okay, that's good. Now we can go back to making this film. But, fortunately to our end advantage, they were like, nah, you need to improve some stuff. And we did. I'm not going to lie. It was frustrating just because I said, there was so much that was required of us at the time in terms of the film we were making that I guess we didn't quite have the bandwidth to devote to the campaign, which it would have been nice to have another team member that was like specifically focused on the campaign, but we couldn't afford that. That wasn't something we could manage. It was just me and him making this film. But once we recognized that the feedback they were giving us was for the best of the campaign and was ultimately going to help us make the money we needed, we sat down and we worked out, what needed to be worked out. A great tip that I remember was in the video, the pitch video, which is so important, right? Because I mean, that's what's really going to hook people. Was just like little things like you don't need to spend time introducing yourselves. Like just cut to you and then have your name and title in the lower thirds. Like just really simple feedback like that was so effective. Just made the video tighter, and it was just really smart. So little things like that.
It's so funny, Zach. Like I was listening to the Mike Birbiglia Working It Out podcast, which is like one of my favorite podcasts about the creative process. And he was talking about how many screenwriters talk about the final pass is like cutting in an entire feature screenplay, like maybe 100 words. And what you're describing is that final pass of just cutting the teeny weeny pieces that take it from like, okay, I guess I'm watching this to like, oh, I'm here, I'm ready. It feels super tight.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was a brilliant comment. And so things like that. Also, I think really important is those copy and pastable social media messages, right? Because you want people to share this thing, but these people, they're only going to devote so much time. They don't want to have to like write out their own little message to share on social media. So give them that. Just write it out for them so they can just copy it and paste it in Facebook or Instagram or whatever. So like that's really, really effective. So I guess what I'm just trying to say is that, for any, filmmakers or creators out there, when you embark on creating a crowdfunding campaign, it's going to take some time. It's going to take some work. All right. Like it's not just something you just write out your log line and bam, it takes time, but really incorporating the feedback that the folks at Seed&Spark, have developed over the many campaigns they've worked on, it really is for the best. So
I'm gonna cut this clip and send it to the crowdfunding specialists who are constantly interfering with people's expectations that they're just going to come in and launch quickly and constantly getting frustration back, just because that's so helpful to hear in retrospect, because they do what is sometimes a little bit thankless work until they see the campaign succeed. And so just to hear someone say that, I'm just going to write to them and be like, hey, I just want you to know, like, once again, they are always grateful for
please
for
do. Please do.
I appreciate that so much.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, I'm not gonna lie, like it was frustrating at first. I was like, what do these people want? But
so listen, we had a couple.
We want you to succeed.
Exactly, and I think that was what we had to recognize. Was it felt like this obstacle that we had to overcome, like we just had to satisfy you guys so that you would just allow us, that you would publish our campaign. But it ultimately was not about that. And the notes you gave really increased the effectiveness of it all. So thank you.
That's great. Well, listen, we had a couple of interesting questions come up in the chat that I want to address. The first one had to do with crowdfunding sites that make it possible to accept donations that can be tax deductible. And I just want to be very clear Kickstarter, IndieGoGo, Seed&Spark, GoFundMe, Facebook, none of those are tax deductible platforms, right? Because none of you are 501c3s.
However, we build what are called agency agreements with 501c3s, and you can get what's called a fiscal sponsor for your campaign, at which point they can help. So IDA does this, Film Independent does, there are tons of fiscal sponsors out there. Most of us work with all of them, and they are very familiar working with us. It's like a 2-page agreement they sign with us that allows us to not get breathed on by the IRS for facilitating the payments. They charge money, right? So it's always important. We typically say, if you're going to get a fiscal, like nobody's contributing $25 for a tax benefit.
Yeah.
So if you are getting a fiscal sponsor and you're going to pay what's often close to 7 to 10%, is what a fiscal sponsor charges. And that's because it costs a ton of money to put together all of that tax paperwork. You need to know why. And it usually should be because you are going after like corporate social responsibility teams at big enterprises to donate to your campaign, or you're going after like local businesses that you think are going to write $1,000 check where that tax deductibility would be meaningful to them. Like, I think you want to have a reason why you are doing a fiscally sponsored campaign that isn't just because you think it's easier to get people to give you money if it's like, I make a lot of contributions and I don't write anything off of on my taxes that's like $25, right? So because there's like, you just have to think about like the nuisance factor for you and others and make sure that you have a real reason and a strategy for having a fiscally sponsored project.
I've also oftentimes talked about how if you are going to go that route where you're looking for a fiscal sponsor, it's probably best if you're aligning yourself with an organization whose mission and vision is directly aligned with the story you're telling, right? It helps, right? It could certainly help. It could certainly help you down the road with marketing, that's for sure, right?
Absolutely. You talked a lot about that in class, John.
Yeah, I think it's really important.
Yeah, and well, values, well, by partnering with an organization like that, and then being sure to weave that into your storytelling will go a long way to help motivate individuals who are going to be motivated by living their values as well.
Right. Another question came up about if crowdfunding got acknowledged in Canada when applying for. So I'm assuming that you guys are global, right? Doesn't matter where the production is going to be done, right?
Yeah.
So I'd say to the person whose comment was, does this get acknowledged when applying for CAVCO? CAVCO is the Canadian Content Credit. CAVCO is blind to crowdfunding monies. It's just blind to it. That's not going to help you pass a cultural test in Canada. And so they're not going to be looking at, because we're not talking about equity investors. So they're not going to be concerned with where you've done this crowdfunding without having, that's not equity raised. Yeah, Stacy, you're going to.
Well, I'm always trying to get in here, John. I'm always trying to get in, buddy. Well, first, Emily, what currencies do you all accept? You'll have to forgive me. I don't know that.
Right now, USD and CAD.
Okay, I figured you guys accepted CAD, and I wanted to make for sure that pointed at it. We do as well. We accept many other currencies as well. So regardless if you're Canadian or wherever one may be, we got you. So.
That's great. That's great to know. There was another. So let's talk for a second about. Well, there was one quick question that said, "Is there a limit to the amount you can raise?" And I'm assuming you don't limit how much people can raise on your platforms, right?
No, but we'll tell you if we don't think there's any chance in hell you'll hit your goal. Like the part of the feedback process is we'll be like. They'll be like, we want to raise $3 million and our social following is 10 people and we've never made a movie before. And we're like, let's reset your expectations.
Right.
Like, I think people have to understand that in the entire history of crowdfunding, I'm talking films specifically, there's only been a handful of projects that have raised over $1 million, period. And those are either in super fan communities, or they were actually, many of them led by the same singular crowdfunding producer who produced some of the biggest crowdfunding campaigns in history. MST 3000, Reading Rainbow, what's the, God, you know the one I'm talking about, Mars, Super Troopers, like all of those were done by the same person, right? So I think just also setting expectations around like what crowdfunding is for and where it sits. Like you don't raise in the millions without either a massive pre-programmed base and a massive strategy, or no, that's it. That's it. That's the only way you can raise millions.
Yeah, so it's interesting that you just said what you said, because you're talking about a massive amount of people that would be necessary. And I did back in 2015, they made it legal to raise crowdfunding for equity, right? It used to be you had to be you had to be a sophisticated investor. You had to be able to lose $250,000. Grandma and grandpa couldn't write a check for $50 and buy an equity ownership interest in something. I mean, you had to really be a sophisticated investor. The Jobs Act was amended in 2015 to allow Mr. and Mrs. Front Porch to actually raise equity on crowdfunding platforms, but it's completely guarded by the rules of the SEC. So, you just like when you're raising equity for any business, there has to be, you've got to have clarity around who the investors are. You've got to have approval of the actual equity vehicle, the investment vehicle. You have to have approval of the product that is being made. There's got to be some kind of good housekeeping seal of approval on every element that touches this equity raise. And there are audits that have to be done. There's reporting that has to be done to the IRS and to the equity investors themselves. There will be accounting that needs to be done. There will be financial reporting that needs to be done for the equity investors so that they understand, whether they're making any money or not. And there needs to be somebody that's actually handling almost like a general contractor that's overseeing all of those processes to make sure that they're being done correctly. So when I did this deep dive into these new platforms, and I learned that the average investment per shareholder was $500. That's the average amount. If you wanted to raise $1 million, you needed 2,000 investors, right, on average. So that means there has to be financial reporting to 2,000 people on a regular basis, right? And there's a fee, and you have to pay fees for all that stuff, right? So
the cost of that $1 million is significant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry, but did you say Mr. and Mrs. Front Porch? I just wanted to touch on that very quickly. I never heard that before. Now, let me tell you, that kind of reporting, Mr. and Mrs. Front Porch, they're very interested in. So, yeah, attention to detail they have.
Yeah. I mean, so I think I think the math that I came up with is if a producer wanted to raise $5 million from 10,000 shareholders, the total fees are going to be $185,000.
Yeah.
Right. So you're right. It's expensive money.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's true in equity raising in general, right? Because you have the lawyer fees and you have the time spent and all of those things. Certainly the platforms that, like, if you raise using an equity platform, they handle a lot of that for you and they can help you kind of understand what those costs are going to be. But I want to make sure that everybody in the audience is very clear that we have shifted to talking about equity crowdfunding, which means you owe a financial return to your backers, which is not what Stacy and Zach and I have been talking about up until now, which is like crowdfunding is go get them tiger money, right? Crowdfunding is I support you. I need to see this in the world. It does not require a financial return. It is certainly the best thing, especially if you're making short form content or stuff that doesn't have clear monetization strategies on the other side of it. Equity is typically for people who can prove their ability to make a return. So when creators who are making their first movie come to me and say, I want to do an equity crowdfunding campaign, I'm like, objectively bad idea. There's no proof with you as a producer that you can produce a financial return, and your pitch in an equity crowdfunding campaign is that this movie will produce a financial return. My favorite example to give is Jim Cummings. Jim Cummings started
Is that Thunder Road?
Thunder Road,
right?
yes.
Oh, it's an awesome,
Yeah.
awesome.
So when I'm like, if you are where Jim Cummings was when he made Thunder Road, which was multiple films under his belt, first as a producer, then as a creator, as a successful crowdfunder, and then having produced financial return, having built a massive audience who just like cult following, that's a great candidate for an equity campaign. Because that's somebody who like doesn't even necessarily need a platform to create a financial return. He's got enough of a Twitter following that he'd be like, everybody send me $10 and you can watch the movie. Like, you're good, right? So I just think it's really important to understand like where these opportunities sit at which points in your career and what needs to be true. It is nearly impossible. And I'm saying this because it is an under 2% of independent films make their money back, and not even make a profit, make their money back. It is nearly impossible to make money on an independent film. So if you are trying to raise money from investors, they either have to really not care about getting their money back or feel really good about this, like, you know, endlessly replicated tax break. You have to work with someone like John who can help get some of their money back through tax incentives. Or you have to have built such an audience relationship in your career that you can actually drive financial outcomes with that relationship with the audience. And that's something I feel like filmmakers jump way ahead of themselves in what's possible. Like, you can look at what's happening at festivals and how many films are actually getting purchased anymore. Most of the major festivals at the major markets walk in there with distribution already guaranteed, right? And the platforms paid for the films to be made in the first place. So like the market that we're in is really challenging from a financial returns perspective, and that has to drive how you are forming your projects. It sucks that film has never been able to exist extricated from capitalism. We haven't figured that out yet. And like most of us are not independently wealthy enough to just like make whatever we want to make on whatever terms. So we have to use these constraints as fuel for our creativity.
Awesome. Thank you. Those are wonderful, wonderful sage words. Stacy, any last comments?
Yeah, I have one last comment. Of course, I want to say something, but yeah, anyone out there, dear viewer, if you have any questions or anything like that, and you're not sure where to get started, email me, Stacy at IndieGoGo.com. More than happy to help you out. Well, I don't want to speak for Emily because I'm sure she might probably want to get in there too. But yeah, so if you have any questions, whatever, you want to use our platform or don't know where to go, hit me up, Stacy at IndieGoGo.com.
Thank you. Zach, any last words?
Thanks for having me. This was really great. I guess kind of back to what I was saying for creators that are, trying to crowdfund, like just know that it's, going to take a little work to craft that campaign, but in the end it's worth it. And be on the lookout for red gloves.
Absolutely. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate your joining me today. And I will follow up with you after.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
Here. Bye-bye.
Thank you, panelists, and thank you to our audience who submitted questions. If we did not get to your question today, or if you think of any questions following this webinar, please know that you can keep the discussion going at theproductioncommunity.com. You can visit our business or product forums to connect with industry professionals along with our team of experts, just like John. If you would like to revisit today's webinar, along with the complete library of Master Series, please head over to ep.com/master series. We have over 60 episodes available for viewing on demand at any time. We also encourage you to visit the EP blog, where you can find industry news, insights, and expert advice by leaders like John and others. And many of his articles cover crowdfunding and other sources of production financing. In addition to these resources, if you happen to be looking for guidance on production incentives or financing in North America, the UK, and beyond, our team of experts is here to ensure that your production gets the best incentive and financing guidance in the industry. Explore the latest in incentive news, use our production incentives map or jurisdiction comparisons tool to visit different options in different locations, and our incentives estimator to see just how much you can save no matter where your production is headed. A special thank you to all of our fantastic panelists for joining us today, and to your audience for tuning in. We hope to see you at the next Master Series.